if you were to ask us what's the one thing that's responsible for our growth, I wouldn't say it's one thing. And you can look from the outside in and say, oh, it's because they have, recognizable founder, or the products are amazing, or whatever it is, or they have amazing ads. And it's really not. There's so much that you don't see behind the scenes, but really you don't have to be amazing at one thing. You just have to figure out, you have to do a lot of things well. You don't have to do everything well, and you don't have to do them perfectly, but you have to do enough things well enough. And I think you have to figure out and be disciplined in which ones those are and which things you're not even going to focus on and worry about.
What is up, Modern Commerce listeners? I want to show you an amazing app we've been using called Triple Whale. You can check it out at trytriplewhale.com. It has all of the business health metrics and growth metrics you could possibly need all in one place, right? So everybody can get on the same page. This has revolutionized our ability to help grow brands and collaborate with brands. Everyone can get on the same page on the most important metrics. So if you're a media buyer, you can come into this and you can just use this little pin icon right here, and you can pin to the top the most important stuff to you. So if I'm a media buyer, I might have ROAS, I might have ad spend, I might have new customer ROAS, right? But if I'm an owner, maybe those things aren't as important to me. Maybe I just want, net profit, show me the net profit, show me the sales, right? Show me the number of orders. So everyone on the team can get in line, get, on the same page of what the most important growth metrics are, because it's different for every brand. So grab Triple Whale at trytriplewhale.com. Use it. I promise you it will make your growth path far more clear. And enjoy this episode of Modern Commerce.
Welcome back, Modern Commerce. You're here again with Casey and John, and today we've got another hard-hitting interview for you. We're continuing our How to Build a Brand series. This one is John's baby, really. This was all his idea, so you can thank him for all these awesome interviews we're getting lately. John, who do we have today with us?
Thank you, Casey. And before we move to that, I need to comment on the bomber jacket. It is fantastic. I'm a big fan. Stick with it. Yeah, give me more black t-shirt with bomber jacket. I'm all about it.
Thanks, dude. I'm glad you noticed underneath, too. It was just a black t-shirt, and you're like, hey, man, you wear a lot of black t-shirts. I'm like, I like them. So today, just for you, I put on a jacket.
I like it. Today, we have a super awesome guest, somebody I kind of hounded you for like months, right, Cody, to be on here. We have Cody Plofker, who is the CMO of Jones Road Beauty. I won't over intro him, but yeah, this was a guest that I really wanted to get on for a long time. Somebody who I really respect in e-commerce and marketing. So yeah, Cody, if you want to give us maybe just a little background on you and a little background on Jones Road Beauty. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate having me. I've listened to a bunch of them and they're really good. So really excited to chat. Cody, I'm CMO at Jones Road Beauty. So we are a clean 8-figure beauty brand founded by Bobby Brown. We're pretty new, but growing really fast. And yeah, excited to be here. Kind of come from an untraditional background. My first kind of job, I actually owned a gym and a physical therapy clinic with my now wife. And that's kind of how I learned marketing. I just have like an addictive personality. So as soon as I learned like that was what we needed to do to actually grow and survive, I just got kind of completely hooked on it, got really into like direct response marketing, like old school copywriting. Obviously made my way over to Facebook ads, got hooked on it, and kind of one thing became another, and here we are.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I mean, it was similar for me, right? Like I didn't own a business, but it was like I got hired to be like the director of marketing for, like, I was not qualified at all. And so it's like, yeah, you just get hooked on it. And then you get that feeling of like, hey, I spent $1 and I turned it into more dollars. Like, that's pretty crazy. Yeah, it's hard to let go, but yeah. So give me a little background.
Back in the old days though, when you could do that, it was a lot easier.
Yeah. Now it's a little bit harder to turn $1 into very many more dollars, but yeah. So great. And give me a little background on the brand, on Jones Road Beauty, because I think this is actually a really cool story that you're pretty connected to. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. So the brand is, if anybody has ever heard of Bobby Brown, my mom is Bobby Brown. So she's a pretty well-known makeup artist. So after leaving Bobby Brown Cosmetics, decided to found Jones Road Beauty, and she launched it October 2020. So pretty much kind of like mid-pandemic. And, we're a clean brand. It's really trying to take everything that she has learned throughout her career and kind of simplifying that down into like a no makeup look. But, obviously clean products weren't really a thing back then. So that's kind of another value add that we have. And it's been amazing. I mean, since launch, it's just been really well received. Obviously, really fortunate to have, a well-known founder and an existing audience. But it's just been a ton of fun. Obviously, there's always been struggles, but yeah, we've grown really quickly. I mean, did 8 figures in the first year, and continuing to grow really fast. And obviously, there are issues and supply chain things, but it's been awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, okay, one of the things you and I have like gone back and forth about on Twitter. So, what I want to do, and what I've kind of told you up front is we're looking to do kind of brand growth stories. We want to tell you kind of some of the successes you've had, some of the things people can learn from, but also some of the circumstantial stuff, right? Like some of the stuff that like somebody could go copy this and I give you the exact playbook we run, but it doesn't mean it's going to work for you because we have, XYZ unique circumstance or something like that. And one of the things you and I have talked about on Twitter that is like one of my favorite topics is moats, true moats, right? Like, and if you're not familiar with that term, a moat meaning like, a moat around a castle. If you have like a deep and wide moat around a castle, it's harder to get in, right? In medieval times. The same thing with the business, like a true moat around the business that make it really hard for somebody to replicate, like really hard for your business to sort of like go under, right? To get like, taken over or attacked. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but it really is like a great defense around your business. And you and I have talked about that. And I think it's something Jones Road Beauty has. So, I mean, I would be interested in your perspective on like, is this something you got involved with because you saw there is a true moat here? Or is it like, is there a world where you would have gotten involved with marketing, e-commerce brands that didn't have true moats? Like, did you have that foresight when you got involved, or were you still just like, yeah, I'm a beast at Facebook ads, so we'll be good to go? You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. So before this company, I was involved in e-commerce, and that's pretty much what I was doing. And, that was, 2018 through like 2020, I guess. Mm-hmm. And you really didn't have to have a moat because obviously that was pre-iOS. And so I'm 29 years old, but I was probably 26, 27 then. And I was so arrogant that I truly thought that none of that stuff mattered. I didn't think brand mattered. I had no idea what gross margins meant. I knew LTV mattered, but I thought anybody could get LTV through email, like upsells and stuff like that. Right. But really, like, why do you have to do all stuff? Like, just do Facebook. Like, I spend $1, I get $5 back. Like, let's just do that. And like, none of that stuff really mattered. And obviously, it helped. And a brand that has a true moat, whether that's a celebrity founder, which I believe is one of ours, whether that's amazing margins or vertical integration or a negative cash conversion cycle, it helped, but it wasn't a necessity. And now I feel like the brands that are doing well and the brands that are struggling, that's really the most important thing. It can be a truly differentiated product. It can be amazing margins, amazing LTV, a brand. But I think it's a necessity now in direct to consumer versus it was just an afterthought or a luxury before.
Right. And I think that I would actually say still it is in the true sense that we're talking about, like what is a real moat, a real competitive advantage, a thing that is like, it's pretty hard to cross. I think it's still a little bit of an afterthought for a lot of the people in more of like the founder category aren't necessarily catching up to that. The marketers, I think, have known for a while, right? Like the people who went from maybe drop shipping to like kind of more branded drop shipping, domestic drop shipping to like maybe sourcing and 3PL. Like they've kind of realized for a while that like, yeah, look, even sourcing 3PL, like building that brand, it doesn't really like there's got to be a more true moat. But I have noticed that like, now that e-commerce is becoming a little more mainstream, getting picked up by aggregators, VCs, things like that, it seems like, maybe they're a little unaware. Like, I think somebody pitched me to be an early investor, which I'm not even really an investor. Like, I'm not advertising on my podcast that I'm here to invest in brands. Like, I definitely couldn't write a very big check if I did. But it was like, they just wanted to launch a dog products brand, with product they sourced in China, which no problem sourcing product, that's fine. But like, they wanted to launch a dog products brand with this sort of like sustainability kind of message of like they were gonna donate a percentage of proceeds to, and I'm like, it's too played out, like it's not a real moat. I just I hate to like kind of burst that bubble for anybody in that category, but yeah, that I don't mean to ramble on this, but I think that's what we're talking about, right? Is true moats. So one that we hear a lot, Casey, right, is like
Oh, my product. My product is my moat. Like our product is really great. Or my brand is my moat. So my brand is really great. And what do you say to that? Because sometimes I'm like a little skeptical there, but I'll save my thoughts. Like Cody, what are your thoughts there? Like, can product that's not truly exclusive to you be a moat? Can brand be a moat if it's not a certain size?
The way I would think about moat is like if Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk came along and entered your category tomorrow, would you be, scared of what they would do, right?
Right.
And they can knock off your product. Anybody, unless you have some, I guess, copyrights or patents or something, anybody with the right resources can knock off your product. I mean, you could even say if you're thinking about logistics things, whether that's vertical integration or amazing relationships and terms with your vendors, that can be knocked off pretty easily. So I do think that those help, but they're not a direct moat. I don't think product is a moat. I do think you have to have it. You can't be the same skincare brand that everybody else has. You do have, I think, a few companies, like for example, Casper. I wouldn't say that they have a moat for their product, right? I think that they didn't really have a moat, and I think that's why they've kind of had a hard time on the public markets. Just because it's a bed, and it's not even that good of a bed. I think it's probably like an average bed, and a little bit overpriced. They don't, but seriously, what is their moat? Like, besides being like an early DTC company, like maybe they said DTC was a moat, and now that there's no competition, or there's tons of competition there.
Yeah, we've said this before. It's like, hey, if your moat is that you're a disruptor, most spaces have been pretty disrupted at this point. So like, being a true disruptor can be a competitive advantage if you are one. And sometimes we'll have brands come along that say that's their moat. Like, oh, there's this need, there's this gap. We're filling a market gap. Like that's one of the favorite phrases of D2C founders, right? Is we're filling a market gap. And I feel like we're kind of like poo-pooing a little bit here, and we'll get away from it. But like, are you really like, and it maybe you are, but is it really a very big gap? Because the mattress space has now been disrupted like 50 times in the last 5-10 years. So I don't know if you can really be a disruptor there anymore. Or there's certain spaces. We actually worked with one last year that was like seat covers that people put in their truck. And I'm like, this is a space that hasn't been disrupted yet, like, because nobody cares. But I mean, for the most part, if that's the moat, or if that's the competitive advantage, I'm with you. I don't know if that like disruptor angle really is it anymore,
Yeah, and it also, when you have a moat, it's not to say that you can't do other things well. Maybe you can get to 7 figures with, a decent product and a great brand or great storytelling, or good whatever margins. But to actually get to like, bigger outcomes and whatever, your goal is, like, you probably need multiple things. And it's not that you need multiple moats, but just a moat doesn't fix it. You need, if you have an amazing brand, you still need a great product, or that's going to catch up to you, if you have great retention, you still need an amazing product. Like, there's multiple things that are important, and because there's now so much more competition, it's that. But if you don't have anything, you're going to be really struggling.
You got to have some. You can't just live on great marketing. I think is the TLDR version. And
for sure.
And like to your point, if you've got a moat, that doesn't mean it's going to work. Because I mean, like, look, what if product really is your moat? If it's like, okay, this product really is incredible, well, that's fine. That should show up in lifetime values, right? Like if the product is so good that people aren't going to be able to live without it once they use it, but you still have to get them to use it the first time. So, if that's the whole moat, and then you were like really bad at everything else, then you're probably not even going to be able to get them to use it the first time efficiently enough. Or if you do have a moat, you got to leverage it, right? Like we actually worked with a brand that had like a very real moat. One of their founders was a major celebrity. Like if I said the name, it's an athlete. And if I said the name, you would know it. Like an athlete that's transcended beyond just their sport. Like that she wouldn't allow herself to be used in ads. Like she wouldn't allow us to whitelist. And I'm like, it's not like she's just a partner, right? Like she's a founding member. And it's like, well, okay, yeah, your moat just went away. So if you can't leverage it, like that's another thing. So, okay, I want to move past this a little bit. Wait, one more thing almost. So if if you don't have one, like let's say there's no celebrity, that you're not vertically integrated, and those are the two that like a lot of times you're just that from launch, right? Like it's a celebrity brand or it's an influencer brand, or you like just started by like being a maker and then you kind of vertically integrated your processes or whatever. So let's say you don't have, can one be manufactured? What do you think? Like, is that possible?
Can you manufacture moat? I guess that's marketing. I think the difference is a lot of people thought that performance marketing was a moat, or you didn't need a moat because you could, again, growth marketing, paid marketing, like anything succeeded. The messaging wasn't as important. I do think, and again, it depends on your goals and size. And I know we've had debates on Twitter about like, is product even important? And I think it depends what your definition of success looks like. You can get to 7 figures even if you have some good storytelling, some good design and branding. But if you're trying to get to an IPO, like obviously you have to have an amazing product. So I think that's just like the first disclaimer, that I do think it depends. I do think that you can get to a decent size. The reason I'm saying I do think you can get to a decent size, 7 to even 8 figures, with brand as your moat, meaning a decent product. Doesn't have to be amazing. Can't be terrible, but doesn't have to be amazing. And get brand storytelling or having an audience.
Right.
I do think that you could launch a brand and be successful, even if your product was not that differentiated, if you had an amazing, whether that's personality or audience.
I agree. So if you're not an influencer celebrity at the start, I actually think you can build a community with a brand, right? Like, especially if there's a common interest. So Jones Road Beauty, I'm sure you guys are focused on, and I think we've talked about this, something you're focused on right now is building community.
Yeah.
Community is another, that's a manufactured moat, right? Like, hey, we started with this brand, we started selling, we have customers. So you have the makings of a community already, and now you just have to move it to a place where a community can live and thrive and interact with each other. So cool. Yeah. I mean, talk to me maybe a little bit, let's get back to Jones Road.
Yeah.
I have a couple questions here because so you kind of launched, you had this kind of really great first year. I would suspect that was, heavily, I would suspect that like the main driver of that, and correct me if I'm wrong, I suspect the main driver of that is what we're just talking about. It's your moat of having a pretty real celebrity
Exactly.
behind the brand, and then good. I bet it, I would even say it probably didn't even have to be great marketing, just good, solid, fundamental.
I would say good at that would be a very nice way to put it.
Yeah, I'm sure you're great actually, but like, just solid fundamental, like, cause it was just fuel for that fire that was already burning. So where do you go from there? If you're Jones Road, it's like, hey, we got this thing going, we got all this momentum, we have all this tailwind, eventually just that tailwind or that whirlwind of like, hey, we launched on the back of this moat, we launched with good and even maybe great marketing. Like where do we go from here? Like, does that up and to the right trend continue, or do you kind of accept like, look, that trend's not going to continue forever, but we kind of continue to optimize and go that direction? Or do you say, all right, what's the next thing we need to do to get that like hyper growth again?
Always, what's the next thing that we need to do to get that growth? You kind of, and it's not the healthiest thing, but I guess you have to live in kind of a pessimistic state and know that you can be knocked off. Your growth can stall at any minute. If you're hot right now, it can always die off, and definitely don't want to rest on your laurels. And that's something that like, I definitely never thought. And there were probably many internal, meetings and disagreements about this, that our moat was good enough, that you can't just have one, you can't ignore everything else, And so you can't just be a great product company. You can't be a celebrity brand. There are so many examples of all of those that haven't done well and for whatever reason. So I want to be great at everything. I want to have great paid. I want to have great Facebook ads, really good systems for churning that out. I want to have great influencer marketing. Email is pretty much free. So you should be doing there's just no excuse not to be driving 30% to 40% of revenue from email. I wanted to work on our website. You just can't rest on your laurels at all. And I think that has been it. Obviously there's luck, there's our moat, but that's kind of, I think, the key to success is not one area that I think we're crushing. I think we're doing a lot of things well enough. And first year we didn't have to do any conversion rate optimization. Like, we didn't really have to hyper optimize anything. And now that we're able to build out our team, that we have this growth trajectory, like now we're trying to take it from, just okay, good enough to get us to where we want to go. Like, I'm not saying you have to be great at everything, but you have to be pretty good at a bunch of things.
Yeah, I like it. So, because this leads me to my next question, and I didn't even know you were going to go here with team. You're doing something that a lot of e-commerce brands in your stage what are you? I mean, you're not even 2 years old at this point, right? Like a year and you're like 18 months old, right? You're doing something that a lot of e-commerce brands at your stage don't do. So many e-commerce brands at your stage work with, I would say on average, and it depends on the growth trajectory. And your guys is high. You have a fast growth trajectory, so I can kind of understand this. But they're working with agency partners, outsourced work, freelancers, things like that, and keeping their internal team and their payroll and overhead down for the first few years, oftentimes until they get to a point where they have like a pretty solid idea of demand planning, right? And the demand planning in e-commerce, like I always make the joke that demand planning is like, oh, you mean demand guessing? Like, but like until we get to a point where it's like, hey, we know that we'll probably be able to drive, even if everything is worst case scenario, just from our email list, rebuys, everything like that, we'll be able to drive this much revenue, and we know we can cover this much overhead. And that's when they start building the internal team. You're aggressive there. You're building an internal team, and you're building an internal team that isn't just junior people, right? Like you're not building a team of junior people that you can delegate tasks to. You're actually building a team of people that you can delegate outcomes to, like some even like kind of, like I'm guessing not the lowest salary employees out there, right? I'm interested in your philosophy there, because it's a little bit different route, and I'm not saying it's the wrong route. It's a little different route than many go who use agency partners for the first little while.
Yeah, I guess everybody has just their own take and their own perspective on agency versus in-house, and I definitely am very neutral about it. I think we still do have agency partners, and we still do things in-house. It kind of just depends on the part of the business, and it also depends on what your internal team's skills are. So like, for example, we started with a paid social agency just because I wasn't involved, and as I got more involved, like we no longer needed them. We outsource creative because right now video creative is not our strength at all, so we outsource that. And with that being like quote unquote the biggest lever on Facebook, like we felt like it was a better return on our dollars to invest there versus media buying can be a little bit more of a simpler task,
right,
that multiple people can do. We had the growth strategy in-house, for me, so we didn't necessarily need that from an agency partner. But for example, we don't have an engineering team in-house, so obviously we're working with a web developer. Right. A lot of our creative photo shoots and stuff like that is agencies, but we like would never think of outsourcing kind of some of the stuff that I think is like core to your DNA. And I've just seen so many brands. I don't even know what the brands do, because I hire a branding agency, they'll hire a red antler, they'll hire a paid social and a creative and an email agency and a website agency. It's like, what has a brand actually created?
Yeah, they're managers. That's what they are. They're
exactly, yeah. And we're like so not corporate. We're trying to keep everything as lean, as efficient as we can. So number one is just like understanding payroll as a percent of revenue. And I think like we still have an extremely, extremely lean team for the size of our growth in business. I mean, I'm personally still buying the ads, and I'm, I'm in the CMO role at this position. Like I'm personally still posting on TikTok most days. So like we're actually extremely lean compared to other brands I know of at this size. Even though we don't work with that many agencies, each person here is just kind of doing a bit. And I'd rather have, I think what we learned initially is we had a lot of people who, and we didn't really know what we needed. We grew so fast, where we kind of just threw into a role without experience, without proper, direction. And it ends up being a lot more expensive, and you have to move so much slower if you have to babysit. And not everyone's kind of ready for that startup life in a fast growth company. So we'd rather pay a little bit more for somebody who's great. And I think if you have strong leaders at the top of their department, everything else just flows much better, and you can get more out of even less people in that department. But you got to be strong at the top.
What is your position on giving equity to team members?
I would say
it's okay to say you don't do it. I know it's not trendy and hip. It's okay to say, hey, I don't believe in it, and here's why. Just letting you know it's not a trap question. Yeah.
So it depends. We haven't raised money. We have zero plans to raise money. So it's a family-owned company. It's a privately owned company. Right. So it's going to be completely different than if you're going to a venture-backed company. And I think it completely depends. So yeah, for us, it's not really a thing. And it's just kind of depends on what the person's looking for.
I think it is specifically in those scenarios. I think if you're going to like a venture-backed company, if like you're going to like a Thrasio to work,
Yeah.
It's like, it's kind of part of the expectation, right? Like
Yeah.
you guys raise money and then you buy, like, basically you're just like this big like cash machine, right? That like just moves cash around. Like, yeah, I expect like those kinds of companies are cutting basically every team member in on that.
Yeah.
But I think especially with privately owned, the company that is structured, who acquired my agency, they're privately owned, right? Like they've never done any raises, and that's common in the agency space. It's like, they've had this discussion, where do we give equity, like key team members, but like what's equity a function of, or other privately owned e-commerce businesses? Because that's actually one of the things I'm wondering, like if you're looking to attract top talent, is it possible to do so without giving equity? You know what I mean?
It's possible, definitely. I'm not going to say it's easier, but it's certainly possible.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
you might have to pay a little bit more for up front. You might have to really do a better job selling the vision. You might have to kind of build a culture and an experience that they really want to be a part of outside of the equity piece. But if not, yeah, it's not to say if you're privately owned you can't, but it's not going to be, I guess, as commonplace or as expected as with a VC-backed company.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Yeah, and my take on that is that with privately owned companies, what I've said, I've actually heard this from, I don't know if you're familiar with Ryan Dice or Digital Marketer.
Yeah, for sure.
I heard him on a podcast where he said, my position on equity is that equity is a function of risk. Mm-hmm. So if you've taken risk, yeah. And I'm like, that's great. And I actually believe that. So, and like, if you've taken risk, then you may get some equity, right? So if I sell my company to you as part of an acquisition, and maybe a piece of that deal could be some equity in your company because I'm taking a risk selling my company to you, right? Yeah. Like another thing he said is like, if an employee will say, hey, you know what, like I'll take, my going rate for me is probably 150K a year. I'll take 75 and a point or two, right? Like for sure, they're taking a personal risk. So yeah, he's like, to me, if equity is a function of risk, but if you want a top level salary and you want equity, like, a private company probably isn't the place for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No. Okay. So, I want to talk about a little bit about, so you have a lot of tailwind on Jones Road, and now it's kind of a like system of, okay, what do we do to like keep that momentum going? What do you think that, actually, let's take a quick break here, because I know that I'm gonna let Casey hop in here. I know that you're a sports guy, and we like to kind of do some sports analogies. So yeah, Casey.
Yeah. So I don't know if we brought it up on our pre-call call, but yeah, we're a big fan of sports analogies on the show. It's kind of been a staple in these interviews that we ask, do you have a favorite sports metaphor that you bring to the business world, just in large? I'll give you an example. One that we use is like, you run to set up the pass, run to set up the deep pass, right? Like, so it'd be kind of like engaging an audience, not necessarily giving them the biggest offers of all time, all the time, but keeping them engaged. That's handing the ball off a couple times in a row. And when they get used to engaging, but without an offer, that's when you hit them with that big offer. You go long, you go deep, you go for that touchdown throw over the top. I don't know if you're a football fan, it doesn't have to be football. But yeah, whatever analogy you might have.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess maybe not an analogy, maybe a metaphor, and it's pretty simple, but I just think about, and I think a lot of my role right now is building our team. And I just think about it in terms of building a sports team. It can be any team, but probably an NBA team is the most important, and just understanding not only how, like what you need and what the needs are, but really what's most important is how all the pieces fit together, and knowing that you can't put, 5 Michael Jordans or Shaqs on a team, and you can't put, you would never be able to put like Kobe and Shaq and Michael together. It's just too much going on and too many egos. But you also don't want to have the entire team be filled with, 6 man of the year. So you really have to understand, the different personalities, which is, how you're building your culture, but also the different skill sets, and knowing you don't have to be amazingly strong in one area. It really is a team game, and everyone's got to kind of hold their own, but you don't need A players all across the board. Sometimes you're fine with B players, and it's actually, you don't want A players all across the board.
I agree with that. And I think it's like, man, I just hate, I shouldn't say I hate it, but I feel like in wherever people go to get trained to do HR, they get told like, hey, the main thing that you need to do is put in every job description that you're building a rock star team. And like, that's their education. Then they're like, okay, now you've got to go out into the world. yeah, I mean, we've got actually a great recruiter and HR person. So that's like, yeah, I mean, like we got a team of rock stars. Like, how often do you hear that? I'm like, by definition, you cannot have a whole band full of rock stars or a whole team full of rock stars, right? So, but that's me. So yeah, going to sports, like I love that analogy because I'm also an NBA fan. And like, you know, one of the things that I respect most in NBA teams is teams like Golden State this year or like Milwaukee. Like Golden State is getting, I mean, not now because he broke his elbow, but Golden State is getting like 20 minutes a night out of Gary Payton II, who like couldn't even find a home a year ago, right? Like they
that was a
figured
dirty
out,
play, by the way, dirty play.
yeah, I mean, yeah, we could go down that road, but like it's like he couldn't even, like people couldn't even find a use for him, right? Like other teams couldn't even find a use for him, and they figured out a way to use this person. Or like Milwaukee, Grayson Allen is a great example. I'm a Jazz fan. We drafted Grayson Allen. We had no use for him. We traded him to Memphis. He got a little more usage. Milwaukee gets like 20, 25 minutes a night out of Grayson Allen. They just like found a way to use this guy with the other pieces that they have. So, I mean, the championship teams a lot of times are built on, like a super team. You never see super teams with
Can I play devil's advocate just because I'm a Nets fan?
Go for it.
This was a terrible year. I mean, this year was an implosion. You can't put somebody, Kyrie, Kevin Durant, and James Harden. Yes, they're all amazingly skilled, but with their egos, there's just no shot. Yeah,
your cup runneth over with egos. You know, like so that's one of the things I was gonna say. Like, you can't build too much. You can't. Super teams rarely have more than 3 superstars. Mm-hmm. Like, rarely are there more than 3 all-stars on a team. The only one I can think of is Golden State when Draymond Green was an all-star. But that's a homegrown. They drafted all 4 of those all-stars, you know? So like those,
it's rare. And there has to be this level of respect for each other. If you're going to do that, that's just extremely rare.
Right. They built them all from the ground up. That's super rare. And that's the same thing with your, like, you know, if you're acquiring top talent, it's like, yeah, you've got your franchise player, you got your maybe 2 franchise players, but like, you can't put Kevin, Harden, Kyrie all on a team. And if you can do something like that, like let's say there is a combination of 3 guys that, I mean, those are three guys who would be in MVP talks many years. So maybe that's a little too much, but let's say you could get 3 guys like that on the team. It would have to be the right personalities, right?
Exactly.
Like, those 3 personalities aren't the right 3.
That's what I mean with the Warriors. The Warriors were able to do it, right? You got 1 Draymond. And you know, you don't have 2 Draymonds. That's why KD didn't last there. You know, you got Steph, like everybody knows is his team. Clay is an amazing talent, but he's also got, you know, a really humble personality. And then they had Iguodala, who was, you know, like the 6th man of the year, who knows his role and a great contributing member, but he knew his role and he knows he's not Steph.
Right. And a lot of times one of like understating the role of that glue guy who, like, okay, you know, there's a lot of egos here. There's a lot of great players here. Like that grounding player, like an Andre Iguodala. Yeah, I don't know. I love the analogy because it is so true of teams too. Like that, we just went through an acquisition at Structured, and like there's some really great players coming in as part of the acquisition, and it's very like, you know, it can get territorial or it can get like defensive or whatever, and so you know, so far it's been good. I think like if you have the right personalities and people who are willing to like kind of put on the jersey and put the team first, but. I love that. And that's like such a great one as a CMO or as a team builder to have that outlook.
I think to like boil that down, it's really chemistry is what we're getting around. Right. And I like to think of it like, you know, star player, whether it's like Steph or whoever you're talking about, you know, whoever that is in the marketing world, you can like, there's like a value you can put on that person. You're kind of like, this person is worth, you know, if you're going off like Madden ratings, you're like, this person's worth like 90. That's awesome. They're 90. Right. And then this other person, they're kind of more of a role player. The business they're not a cornerstone of the business. They do a good job in the role. They're like a 50, but that's all we need out of that 50. Then John, I appreciate you shouting out the glue guys, because I think of those people as multipliers. I don't think you assign them like a value, you assign them like a multiplicative value, like you know, like they make everybody, you know, times 2 of what they normally are, or maybe more like 1.5 times. So that chemistry is super important. And like you said, with all star players, you're just stacking. You're not multiplying ever. So
no, at the same time, you need some stars though, right? Like in business, in then I hate to call out NBA teams, but you don't want to be the Pistons, right? Where it's like you gotta have you gotta have someone. But like, yeah, you do need some key players. You need some franchise guys.
Sure.
Yeah.
I like how
Cool.
we actually digressed into like actual sports stuff.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen always.
Yeah.
But I always appreciate it.
Low-key, I think Casey and I just want to have a sports podcast. We'll have you on there too.
Coming this fall. No.
Yeah. Cool. So one thing I want to talk over here is first two less things I want to do, and I'll give you a preview. So I want to talk through like iOS 14, right? Like let's just call out the elephant in the room. How has it affected you? Has it been heavy? Has it been like, this has been very noticeable, I don't want to downplay it? Or has it been like, yeah, it wasn't that bad? And then I also want to get into what is working really well for you right now from a growth standpoint. And it doesn't have to be high level growth. It could be like, hey, here's some like actual tactics and marketing stuff that's working really well for us. And what do you feel like you're not doing well right now, or you need to be doing better, or is like, hey, we're not doing this, and I think it's a direction we need to go. So yeah, let's start with iOS 14. Yeah, take it away, man. Yeah.
It hit us. I think it hit us a lot less than everybody else did. You know, first, this was just kind of, this was a board level decision. Like, we didn't want to be a brand that was primarily reliant on paid. You know, we haven't raised money, wanted to be always profitable. So for us, it was really important to keep a certain, you know, blended CAC and to keep a certain MER that was really efficient. And in the early days, you know, we were very under reliant on paid, and have since, you know, have invested more into it to, I think, what's a little bit more of a healthy growth level. But for that being said, you know, we were extremely efficient before. And anybody that looked at our stuff that was a marketer was like, you guys are under investing and you need to spend way more. And, you know, there were times where, especially that being my background, I wanted to scale and I wanted to spend more, but I knew it wasn't in the best long-term interest for the business. Yeah. So that being said, it definitely took a hit. We definitely had some struggles last summer when it first started. We just had to up our game and do everything a lot better. And I think as we kind of progressed and I've gotten better, our team has gotten better. We've you know, been comfortable, or at least have learned where we need to be investing our time and our focus to recapture some of that efficiency. It's been really great, and I think I'm way better because of it. Hopefully, our team is way better because of it. It hurts, but I think because again, there's a moat. The brands that I've seen that continue to do well on paid social, they have certain numbers. They have a high enough AOV, right? They have again, they obviously have LTV and they need it and that kind of stuff. Yeah. But also their paid social is just amplifying what's already working well inside of your business. And I think before that, it didn't have to be. You could be amplifying nothing and it'd be fine. Now that's how I view paid social. And the brands that I think are struggling either just, again, aren't experts at it, haven't cracked it, don't have the right margins, or what they're amplifying is really just not the right thing to be amplifying.
Right. Yeah. They're amplifying, you know, something that's just a little bit too light, you know, it's not substantial enough.
John, that reminds me of what you always say about the gasoline on the fire.
Yeah, no, I mean, I kind of said it earlier, but like, you know, marketing's fuel, right? It's not a fire. If you throw like gasoline on some logs that don't have a fire on it, you just have wet, like gasoline soaked logs. Like there's still no fire there. For sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's if there's no fire already in the business, then you're absolutely right. But I also want to agree on one point there where you kind of like it did hurt, but it's made us better. It has made us better at some stuff. Like we've gotten, you know, away from reliant on the because let's be honest, were the platforms ever really that accurate at tracking? Like, I mean, they were more accurate for sure, but like we've gotten away from that. And I think that's good. Like I like being, now that I'm in the world and I've done the work to get there, I like having a platform that's like, hey, we don't care. We're not pot committed, right? Like we don't care what channel is performing. We're just trying to tell you, you know? And that's like really nice. And we've also had to get better at media mixing, right? So we've had to get a lot better at like looking at Google and understanding how Google and Facebook can play with each other and say like, okay, if we're pumping this up here, like maybe we need to move some budget there across another channel into this like shop campaign, you know, because if we're pushing that product a lot, we're probably going to drive more search volume, whatever it is. Right. So it's like, we've had to get better at media mixing, bringing in things like TikTok, stuff like that. Yeah. I
got more comfortable not directly attributing things. Again, I used to be very like direct response. If I can't see it, it's worthless essentially. Right. Like if I can't see it. And now I'm like, oh, we'll run on Facebook and we'll see that captured in brand search, or, you know, as long as our MER is good, or TikTok is largely view through. and then brand search. And like, I'm totally okay with that now. And you just have to be more patient and more, yeah, like you said, better ability to kind of connect the dots.
Right. Yeah. And I think one thing that's kind of nice about it is that there's a human element required there, because it's like there's no way to like break it down with like very specific data of like they saw this ad clip, like saw it and then thought of it some other, like there's no, like that you there is a little bit of intuition as you're reading that data of like, you know, I think that this is working maybe better than it says or worse than it says or whatever. So
yeah,
which is nice that it's like you can actually get better at something like this. So yeah, no, I agree. I think, you know, it's been a trip, but it's been like, ultimately, I feel like we're a little bit on the other side of it. And it's funny that you were not an aggressive growth brand. So let's take a minute to plug. You're on a podcast, right? Like you have a podcast?
yeah, Ad Spend by Triple Whale.
Yeah, you and Ash, right, who is more of an aggressive growth media buyer.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, check that out. Check out that podcast. So it's funny that it's specifically a podcast about digital ads, and like you guys go get a little nitty gritty.
Oh man, I love it. Don't get me wrong. Like I have to hold myself back like every single day. But yeah, just also knowing, you know, we want to be profitable and we're not trying to go negative in the hole for a little bit. And that's just kind of what we've set up. So I know like the other part of the question, you know, it's like about like what's working well for us.
Yep. Yeah, go for it.
And again, there's a bunch of things that I think are working well. I don't think we have the best Facebook ads in the world, but we're doing fine. We know our numbers. We're scaling pretty well. You know, email is something I think we can always do better. We're especially right now working on optimizing all of our flows, really trying to think from a customer first perspective. You know, we hired Eli Weiss, who's amazing, as our director of CX and retention. So we're really trying to invest in that. But again, I don't think there's one thing that we've necessarily gotten to an expert level yet. One thing, but that is working well that I was very surprised by is TikTok. TikTok is largely responsible for a lot of the growth from last year to this year, pretty exponentially so, and that's both organic and paid. Yes. So it's something that I was one of those people that thought TikTok was stupid and it was just for the kids, and it's been pretty amazing. I'm having a ton of fun, both organically and paid on that.
Yeah, no, and I think don't underplay organic, right? Like it, you know, I'm a paid guy. We like paid TikTok, but to actually invest in organic for the brand. Cool. So, and then and there's other stuff I want to ask you about, but I want to respect the time. So, what do you think right now, Jones Road Beauty could be doing better from a marketing standpoint? Like you think, hey, this is something I think we got to get better at as I look, you know, in kind of future cast 22, 23, 24.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we need to get better about not being reliant on product launches because we're such a new brand. You know, we've been able to roll out a lot of new products monthly, sometimes a few times a month. And it's pretty amazing to see the spike that gives you and, you know, the retention and returning customer rate on those days. However, I think even like right now, like we've had a ton of things coming back in stock. And every time we have a back in stock day, like some months we'll have like 4 or 5 of them just because we with our growth, you know, we haven't been properly forecasted. But, you know, with that being said, now that I'm looking at our upcoming calendar and we have, you know, some months with no launches, which is totally normal for brands, but that's a little scary for me. I think what we need to get better at is building momentum, building buzz, and building, I guess, some kind of scalable organic traffic and awareness growth without relying on product launches.
That grind phase where it's not based around an event. Yeah. So I will actually say, I mean, I'm a big fan of the launch model, like drop products as often as you can, but that's almost just as addicting of a drug as Facebook ads used to be.
Oh my God, totally.
Yeah. So cool, man. Now we have a couple minutes left. So one little segment I kind of want to do here too is if you could ask us something. So I don't mean to be like, hey, we're the experts, because I feel like you've been teaching us. I've been learning from you all episodes. So we have a unique kind of perspective where we're across several brands. If you're kind of thinking through like, hey, when I'm internal, I'm just focusing on this one brand. Like, here's one thing I kind of like wish I had more visibility on across more brands. Like, am I the only one struggling with this? Is this normal? I'm wondering if there's anything like that you were like, hey, yeah, like I would really like to know XYZ. What are you seeing across different brands in this category or in this thing?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. So I would kind of wonder what you see as the biggest problem that gets kind of overcome is that unlocks growth for most brands. You know, if there's something that either you guys work through or you've seen other brands work through, and some common thing where it's a problem that they're struggling with, and once you're able to kind of address it and attack it, like that's the thing that kind of takes off the training wheels.
It's a tough one. So I kind of like tweet around this a lot, and you always engage. But I hate to say like mindset, right? And say like, you know, I don't mean like Gary Vee style, like just hustle. What I mean is actually like self-awareness of what the brand is. And like, we've had so many reps with brands that I can like look at a brand and I can be like, these are the growth levers for that brand.
Okay.
These are but like when you're in a brand, you don't know them. So like for Jones Road Beauty, right? I would look at it and say like, hey, you know, like this is a replenishable product. The growth flywheel for you guys is LTV. And once, you know, like that LTV, your retention revenue, your LTV, that's like compound interest for you. So it will get to points in the future where you'll run at like, I mean, I don't know what your MER is now, but you'll be like, I don't know, do we want an 8 MER this month, or do we want a 10 MER this month? Like, you'll just be able to decide, and you'll be able to do that at a high scale, right? Like you could be spending $500, $1 million a month doing that, right? Maybe that's maybe really big, but like there'll be so much compound interest it's easy to rest on your laurels. So that's a whole other thing. But like, once you're in that position, you have a whole lot of like leeway to try things, to fail, to like become more branded, all of that stuff. But if you're not that, so like, here we go. Ondar wallets, one of my favorite brands. Love those guys. Super great brand. You know, you can only sell people so many wallets. Like your LT, like it's just not a product category that's going to lend itself to high LTVs. And it's hard to do regular product drops in like a hard goods thing. So it's different growth levers, right? So it's about channel distribution and, you know, getting to Amazon, getting to Walmart.com, getting to retail, and allowing that like the whole kind of is what allows you to grow. So those are the growth levers, like identifying what your brand is. And it's a lot of times, like I just gave 2 examples, but there's like all over the map. Like somebody could come up with something and be like, well, it doesn't fit into one of the buckets you said. I'm like, well, it kind of does or whatever. But I
want to make you a shirt that says LTV or wholesale.
Yeah, whole LTV or wholesale. That's it, right? And it's not always that. Sometimes it's actually kind of a combination. Like yeah. So I think that's I mean, you know, there's some that I'm like, you know, there's some that are like content commerce where some of their growth actually comes from like being half media company. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, like I think that being really aware of like what your brand is and what the ultimate growth lever for that brand is, and then being okay with like what you're not going to, like if wholesale is it, for example, you're not going to be able to track one-to-one on your paid media efforts, right? Or on any efforts. Cause it's like, if somebody wants to go buy it on Amazon, they're going to go buy it on Amazon, no matter how hard you target them on Facebook. So yeah, I mean, that's it. So it's a combination of like the right mindset, like self-awareness, and then the right mindset of being able to like accept what you have to accept and like focus where you can actually control within that, which is hard, right? So that's when it really comes down to it, it's like self-awareness and mindset, but like identifying the brand type is probably the more like directly tactical thing, I think.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. That's helpful.
Yeah, cool. All right, so last thing here, we like to do a parting shot. If you've watched some episodes, you have to watch all the way to the end to see it, but like it's kind of the TLDR. A lot of times it's the teaser we put at the top of the video. So as we've had this conversation throughout, it's just kind of like, hey, if you're going to TLDR this and say like, look, it's you know, this is the main thing that I've sort of like learned or thought about, or I've either in this conversation or as I've grown Jones Road. Yeah, I'll kind of hand it to you and let you give us what you feel like the parting shot is for what should be the parting shot for this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if there's one thing I've learned in this last, year and a half, 2 years, there's really no one thing. And if you were to ask us what's the one thing that's responsible for our growth, I wouldn't say it's one thing. And you can look from the outside in and say, oh, it's because they have, recognizable founder, or the products are amazing, or whatever it is, or they have amazing ads. And it's really not. There's so much that you don't see behind the scenes, but really you don't have to be amazing at one thing. You just have to figure out, you have to do a lot of things well. You don't have to do everything well, and you don't have to do them perfectly, but you have to do enough things well enough. And I think you have to figure out and be disciplined in which ones those are and which things you're not even going to focus on and worry about. Because especially if you're a lean team or a bootstrap team, you just don't have the opportunity to do everything, perfectly. But knowing what's good enough, and then most importantly, the people that are doing it, the team, that chemistry together, who you need, building, the support for them. That's the most important thing, because that's who's going to focus on those things and then make those things into your strengths and attack those weaknesses as well.
That was like such a succinct way to say something I try to say all the time. Like, just chills. That was amazing. So like,
appreciate it, man.
It's just like prioritization and like knowing where to focus. And yeah, I love it, man. So Cody, appreciate you being here. This has been an incredible episode. Casey, I'll let you take it out. Say all the YouTube things.
All right, guys. Thanks for being here, watching this episode. Thank you, Cody, for doing this interview with us. Thanks, John, for leading it. I don't know where I'd be if I had to ask all the questions. Like, what's your favorite sports team? Anyway, guys, thanks for watching this episode. If you watched this far, I'm hoping you liked this episode. So please go ahead and actually like this episode down below. Drop a comment maybe if you have anything to say about it. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you're subscribed to the channel. Hit the bell icon to get notifications about whenever we drop new content onto the channel. And as always, until next time, we'll see you.